My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the silence like broken glass. "Don't play blind, Dorothy. You're useless anyway." I sat perfectly still as her manicured fingers rifled through my jewelry box, the sound of metal clinking against wood echoing in my bedroom. That afternoon, the hidden camera footage went straight to Detective Martinez. Within 3 weeks, she was arrested for elder abuse. My son filed for divorce, and every stolen item was returned with compound interest. She thought my failing eyesight made me helpless. She never realized I had been documenting her every theft, her every cruel word, her every calculated move for months. Before we dive into this story of justice served, I scold, I'm genuinely curious, where in this vast, beautiful world are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories of underdogs fighting back against those who underestimate them inspire you, smash that subscribe button. Because you absolutely won't believe how this 73-year-old retired librarian turned the tables on a thief who thought advanced age and declining vision made her the perfect victim. This grandmother was about to teach everyone a lesson they'd never forget. Dorothy Ashford had called the same adobe-style ranch house in Willowbrook, Arizona home for 52 years. The desert town sat nestled between red rock formations and sprawling saguaro cacti, where summer temperatures soared past 110 degrees and winter evenings required wool cardigans. Her house on Mesquite Lane had been her sanctuary through decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and loss. The morning light still found its way through the hand-stitched curtains her late husband Gerald hung in 1987, but these days, it arrived as soft, golden blurs rather than the sharp, defined rays she remembered from her younger years. Macular degeneration had been steadily stealing her central vision for 4 years now, transforming familiar faces into shadowy outlines and turning her beloved books into collections of impossible, jumbled symbols. But Dorothy's mind remained as sharp as the day she'd earned her master's in library science from Arizona State University. Her hearing had grown remarkably keener with each month that passed, developing into an almost supernatural ability to detect the subtlest changes in her environment. She could identify approaching footsteps from 4 rooms away, distinguish between the sounds of someone genuinely cleaning versus someone secretly searching, and most importantly, she had developed an uncanny ability to detect the difference between authentic care and calculated performance. Dorothy hadn't always lived alone in the desert house. For 37 years, she had shared it with Gerald, a gentleman who taught high school mathematics and spent his evenings building intricate birdhouses in their garage workshop. They had raised 2 sons together, Michael, now 48 and living in Seattle with his wife and twin daughters, and Kevin, 45, who had remained in Arizona after his messy divorce 3 years earlier. Gerald's sudden heart attack at age 69 had shattered Dorothy's world, but it hadn't broken her spirit. As the head librarian at Willowbrook Public Library for 31 years, she had developed an inner strength that surprised even her closest friends. She had managed budgets, supervised staff, organized community programs, and somehow always found time to help struggling students with their research projects. Former patrons still stopped her in the grocery store to thank her for recommending the perfect book at exactly the right moment in their lives. The library had been her kingdom, and she had ruled it with gentle authority, infinite patience, and an encyclopedic knowledge of where every single book belonged. Even now, 4 years into retirement, she could still remember the Dewey Decimal numbers for obscure reference materials and exactly which shelf held the best collection of poetry about desert landscapes. When the macular degeneration diagnosis came, Dorothy had initially felt devastated. Reading had been her greatest passion, her refuge, her joy. But she had adapted with the same methodical determination that had made her legendary among library patrons. She learned Braille, mastered audiobooks, and developed organizational systems that allowed her to maintain her independence even as her central vision continued to deteriorate. 2.5 years ago, Kevin had met Vanessa Hartwell at a wine bar in Scottsdale. She was 38, stunningly beautiful in that carefully crafted Instagram influencer way, with platinum blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, a yoga-toned figure that she maintained through expensive personal training sessions, and a wardrobe that cost more than Dorothy's annual property taxes. Vanessa claimed to work in luxury real estate consulting, though Dorothy had never seen evidence of any actual clients or successful sales. She drove a leased BMW, lived in a trendy downtown loft, and seemed to have unlimited time for shopping, spa treatments, and lengthy phone conversations with mysterious friends about investment opportunities. Kevin, still emotionally wounded from his bitter divorce, had fallen head over heels within weeks. At 45, he had convinced himself that finding love again was impossible until Vanessa swept into his life like a desert whirlwind. She was everything his ex-wife hadn't been: glamorous, attentive, and seemingly fascinated by every word he spoke. The wedding had been a small affair in Dorothy's backyard, under the Ramada Gerald had built 20 years earlier. Dorothy had smiled and played the role of the happy mother-in-law, but something about Vanessa had immediately set off her internal alarm systems. Maybe it was the way Vanessa's eyes had lingered too long on Dorothy's antique jewelry during their first meeting. Perhaps it was how she had steered conversations toward Dorothy's finances, her will, and her valuable collectibles with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Or maybe it was the way Vanessa's voice changed when she thought nobody else was listening. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 2:15 p.m., Vanessa would arrive at Dorothy's house with her oversized Prada purse and her perfectly rehearsed smile. "Just checking on you, Mom Ashford," she would chirp, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that made Dorothy's teeth ache. "Kevin worries about you being alone so much." The routine never varied. Vanessa would spend exactly 15 minutes in the living room, making small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, or some minor celebrity scandal she'd seen on social media. She would ask about Dorothy's medication schedule, whether she was eating properly, and if she needed anything from the grocery store, questions that sounded caring but felt oddly probing. Then came the real purpose of her visits. "Mind if I use your restroom?" she would ask, already heading toward the hallway that led to Dorothy's bedroom. Or, "I thought I'd check on those plants in your bedroom. They looked a little droopy last time." Dorothy's bedroom had become Vanessa's hunting ground. It contained Dorothy's jewelry collection, nothing extraordinarily valuable, but pieces with sentimental worth that had accumulated over decades. Her mother's pearl earrings from the 1940s, the turquoise bracelet Gerald had bought her during their honeymoon trip to Santa Fe, a small silver locket containing photos of Kevin and Michael as toddlers. The bedroom also housed Dorothy's antique dresser, where she kept important documents, emergency cash, and small treasures that held memories rather than monetary value. A ceramic figurine from their anniversary trip to Italy, silver letter openers that had belonged to her grandmother, vintage fountain pens from her library career. When they were alone, truly alone, with no neighbors visible through windows and no possibility of Kevin dropping by unexpectedly, Vanessa's carefully constructed persona would crack like paint in desert sun. She would sigh dramatically while pretending to help organize Dorothy's medication. "God, this is like babysitting," she would mutter under her breath. Loud enough for Dorothy to hear but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. When is this old bat going to just move to assisted living and stop being everyone's problem? Vanessa handled Dorothy's belongings with the carelessness of someone who viewed them as future inheritance. Rather than cherished memories, she would move items around without asking permission, rifle through drawers under the pretense of helping organize, and speak to Dorothy with barely concealed impatience. "You probably won't even remember where you put this anyway," she would say while relocating something important. Or, "This old stuff is just cluttering up the place. You should really think about downsizing." The cruelest moments came when Dorothy would ask questions about missing items. Vanessa would adopt a tone of exaggerated concern mixed with condescension. "Oh honey, you're getting confused again. I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Maybe Kevin should look into some memory care options for you." Dorothy began noticing small items going missing about 6 months after Vanessa joined the family. Nothing dramatic at first, things that could reasonably be misplaced or forgotten. A silver bookmark that had been a retirement gift from her library staff, a small decorative box that usually sat on her nightstand, $20 bills from the emergency envelope she kept in her dresser drawer. When she mentioned these disappearances to Kevin during his weekly phone calls, his response was always the same: "Mom, you probably just misplaced them. Your eyes aren't what they used to be." And sometimes memory issues can start showing up around your age. Maybe Vanessa can help you stay more organized. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. Your eyes aren't what they used to be, as if failing vision automatically meant failing memory, failing judgment, failing credibility as a witness to her own life. But Dorothy knew better. Losing her central vision had actually sharpened her other senses to an almost supernatural degree. She had developed mental maps of her home so detailed that she could navigate in complete darkness. She knew the exact weight and texture of every object she owned, could identify items by their smell or the sound they made when moved. More importantly, she had spent 3 decades as a librarian developing organizational systems that would put military logistics officers to shame. Everything in her house had a specific place, and she knew immediately when something had been moved, removed, or replaced. As weeks turned to months, Dorothy began to detect a disturbing pattern. Items would disappear during Vanessa's visits, only to sometimes reappear days later in slightly different locations. Cash would vanish from her emergency fund, but the exact amounts were always small enough that Kevin would dismiss her concerns as confusion or paranoia. Vanessa was testing Dorothy's awareness, pushing boundaries to see how much she could get away with before facing consequences. She was conducting a careful campaign of theft disguised as helpfulness, manipulation masked as care. Dorothy also noticed that Vanessa's visits became longer when Kevin was out of town for work. His job as a project manager for a construction company occasionally required travel to job sites in other cities, and Vanessa seemed to have an uncanny ability to know exactly when he would be away. During these extended visits, Dorothy's hearing would pick up sounds that didn't belong in her house: drawers being opened and closed more frequently than necessary, papers being shuffled in her home office, the distinctive sound of her jewelry box lid being lifted and lowered repeatedly. Perhaps more disturbing than the thefts were Vanessa's psychological tactics. She had clearly researched elder abuse strategies, because her approach was textbook manipulation designed to make Dorothy doubt her own perceptions and memories. "Are you sure you had that necklace?" Vanessa would ask with false concern. "I don't remember ever seeing it." "Maybe you're thinking of something you had years ago and gave away." Or, "Dorothy, you've asked me about that same missing item 3 times today. I'm starting to worry about you. Maybe we should have Kevin take you to see a doctor about these memory issues." Vanessa was gaslighting Dorothy with surgical precision, using her visual impairment as a weapon to undermine her credibility. Every missing item was reframed as Dorothy's confusion. Every accurate observation was dismissed as the fantasies of an aging mind. The most insidious part was how Vanessa would share these concerns with Kevin in Dorothy's presence, speaking about her as if she wasn't in the room. "I'm really worried about your mom, honey. She's been so confused lately, accusing people of stealing things, getting paranoid. Maybe it's time to start looking at some care facilities." But Dorothy Ashford hadn't survived 73 years by being anyone's victim. The same iron determination that had helped her earn advanced degrees in an era when few women pursued higher education, build a respected career in library sciences, and raise 2 sons as a widow, began to emerge from beneath the polite facade she had maintained. She started paying closer attention to the subtle details of Vanessa's visits, the way her daughter-in-law's breathing changed when she entered the bedroom, how her footsteps became lighter and more careful when she thought Dorothy wasn't listening, the barely audible sounds of zippers and clasps being opened and closed. Dorothy also began testing Vanessa's responses to different situations. She would mention non-existent missing items to see if Vanessa would claim to remember them. She would place objects in specific locations and check whether they had been moved after visits. She started keeping mental notes about which topics made Vanessa uncomfortable and which questions prompted evasive answers. Most importantly, Dorothy began to remember stories from her library career: patrons who had tried to steal rare books, employees who had skimmed money from fine payments, Community members who had attempted to manipulate library policies for personal gain. She had dealt with manipulation and theft before, just never from within her own family. What Kevin and Vanessa didn't understand was that losing her sight had actually made Dorothy more observant. Not less. She had learned to gather information through multiple senses, to detect lies through voice patterns and breathing changes, to identify people by their unique combinations of perfume, soap, and personal scents. And she had also learned something else during her 73 years on this earth. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who assume you're not paying attention, not fighting back. Not capable of defending yourself, Vanessa thought she was. Dealing with a helpless old woman whose vision problems made her an easy target for financial exploitation and psychological manipulation. She had convinced herself that Dorothy's age and disability rendered her powerless, voiceless, and defenseless. She was about to discover that she had catastrophically underestimated Dorothy Ashford. As Vanessa's visits became more frequent and Dorothy's belongings continued to disappear with increasing boldness, something fundamental began to shift inside the elderly librarian. The same methodical precision that had made her legendary for organizing massive book collections, the same protective instincts that had made her fiercely advocate for vulnerable library patrons, and the same quiet strength that had sustained her through decades of challenges, began to coalesce into something far more dangerous than Vanessa could have imagined. Dorothy Ashford was about to remind everyone why her former library colleagues still spoke of her organizational skills with awe, why troubled teenagers had sought her guidance for decades, and why her late husband Gerald used to joke that she could solve complex problems while simultaneously helping 6 different people find exactly the books they needed. Vanessa had picked the wrong grandmother to underestimate, she had chosen the wrong house to rob, and she had made the fatal mistake of assuming that kindness meant weakness, that age meant vulnerability, and that visual impairment meant intellectual impairment. Dorothy was about to teach her a lesson in consequences that would echo through the family for generations. The retired librarian was about to demonstrate that sometimes the quietest people are simply choosing their battles carefully, and when they finally decide to fight back, they do so with devastating precision. The stage was set, the players were in position, and Dorothy Ashford was about to show everyone what happens when you mistake patience for weakness and assume that silence means consent. Vanessa's theft and manipulation campaign was about to meet an opponent who had been preparing for this battle her entire professional life, someone who understood that the best defense against predators was meticulous documentation, strategic thinking, and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment to strike back with overwhelming evidence. The game was about to begin, and Dorothy held all the advantages that Vanessa was too arrogant to recognize. The grandfather clock in Dorothy's living room chimed to 10 p.m., its melodic tones echoing through the adobe house like a warning bell. Dorothy sat in her favorite armchair by the picture window, fingers tracing the worn fabric of the arms where Gerald used to rest his coffee mug during their evening conversations. The desert afternoon sun streamed through the mesquite trees in her front yard, casting dancing shadows that she could perceive as gentle movements of light and dark. 5 minutes. In exactly 5 minutes, Vanessa would arrive for her Tuesday wellness check, armed with her designer purse, her practiced smile, and her insatiable hunger for whatever she could steal without consequence. Dorothy had been tracking these visits for months now, and Vanessa's punctuality was as predictable as the Arizona sunrise. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway confirmed Dorothy's internal clock. Vanessa's BMW, the one she claimed was a business expense despite never showing evidence of any actual business, had arrived right on schedule. Dorothy could hear the distinctive click of high heels on the flagstone walkway, each step deliberate and confident. The footsteps paused at the front door, followed by the theatrical clearing of throat that always preceded Vanessa's performance. 3 quick knocks, never 2, never 4. Always 3, as if Vanessa had calculated the exact number that would sound caring but not overly eager. "Coming, dear," Dorothy called out, pushing herself up from the armchair with the careful movements of someone who had learned to navigate a world increasingly defined by shadows and sounds rather than clear images. She made her way to the front, door, her hand finding the familiar brass knob that Gerald had polished every Saturday morning for 37 years. "Dorothy, you look wonderful today," Vanessa announced as she swept into the house, bringing with her the overwhelming scent of expensive perfume mixed with hairspray and something synthetic that I had never been able to identify. Smell was too strong, too intentional, like everything else about Kevin's wife. Vanessa's voice carried that particular tone Dorothy had learned to recognize, artificially bright, with an underlying current of impatience that she thought her elderly mother-in-law couldn't detect. It was the voice of someone going through the motions of caring while mentally calculating how quickly she could complete her real business. "How are you feeling? Any dizzy spells, problems with your medications?" The questions tumbled out in rapid succession, sounding like a medical checklist rather than genuine concern. Dorothy had noticed that Vanessa always asked about her health with the enthusiasm of someone hoping for bad news. "I'm doing quite well, thank you," Dorothy replied, settling back into her armchair. "My energy has been good, and the new drops from Dr. Peterson seem to be helping with the eye pressure." Dorothy watched Vanessa's blurred silhouette through her peripheral vision, noting the slight stiffening of her shoulders at the mention of good health. Vanessa had made it clear on several occasions that she thought Dorothy should consider her options regarding assisted living facilities. Every positive health update seemed to disappoint her. "That's nice," Vanessa said, her voice losing some of its artificial brightness. "Though you know, Dorothy, living alone at your age can be risky even when you're feeling well. One fall, one medical emergency, and you could be in serious trouble before anyone finds you." This was a familiar script. Vanessa had been planting seeds of doubt about Dorothy's independence for months, always framing her concerns in language that sounded protective while actually being undermining. She wanted Dorothy to feel vulnerable, isolated, and dependent on her help. Vanessa positioned herself on the sofa across from Dorothy, crossing her legs in a way that made her jewelry catch the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Dorothy could hear the soft metallic sounds of bracelets shifting against each other, expensive pieces that seemed inconsistent with someone who claimed to be struggling to establish her real estate consulting business. "So, any exciting visitors this week?" Vanessa asked with forced casualness. "I worry about you not seeing enough people." This was intelligence gathering disguised as small talk. Vanessa needed to know who might be coming by the house, who might witness her behavior, who might interfere with her activities. Dorothy had learned to parse these seemingly innocent questions for their true purpose. "Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought me some tomatoes from her garden yesterday," Dorothy replied truthfully. "And the postal worker, James, always stops to chat when he has packages to deliver." Such a thoughtful young man. Dorothy could sense Vanessa's slight irritation at the mention of neighbors who paid attention. Predators preferred isolated victims, and Dorothy's friendly relationships with her neighbors complicated Vanessa's plans. "That's sweet of Mrs. Rodriguez," Vanessa said with manufactured enthusiasm, "though you know, you should be careful about letting too many people into your house. There are so many scams targeting seniors these days, people pretending to be helpful while they're actually casing your home for valuables." The irony was so thick Dorothy almost choked on it. Here was the person actively stealing from her, warning her about the dangers of trusting people who might steal from her. Vanessa's audacity was breathtaking. "I appreciate your concern, dear," Dorothy said carefully. "I've always been a good judge of character." 20 minutes into the visit, Vanessa made her first move toward Dorothy's bedroom. The pattern never varied: establish false intimacy through conversation, express manufactured concern about Dorothy's well-being, then find a reason to access the private areas of the house where the real treasures waited. "I should check on those plants in your bedroom," Vanessa announced, already rising from the sofa. "Last time I was here, that fern by your window looked a little droopy. Desert air can be so hard on houseplants." Dorothy didn't have a fern by her bedroom window. She had a small jade plant that thrived in the dry Arizona climate and required minimal water. Vanessa's lie was casual and unnecessary, which told Dorothy that her daughter-in-law was comfortable with deception and didn't respect Dorothy enough to craft believable stories. "That's thoughtful of you," Dorothy replied evenly. though I watered all the plants yesterday morning." "Oh, I'm sure you did your best," Vanessa said with condescension dripping from every word. "But sometimes it's hard to tell when you can't see the leaves clearly. I have experience with houseplants from my real estate work, staging properties and all that." Another lie. Dorothy had never seen evidence that Vanessa worked in property staging, real estate sales, or any other profession that would give her expertise with houseplants. But the lie served its purpose. It gave Vanessa a reason to access Dorothy's bedroom while simultaneously undermining Dorothy's competence. Dorothy listened to Vanessa's footsteps moving down the hallway, noting how they changed from the sharp clicks of heels on tile to softer sounds as she reached the carpeted area near the bedrooms. The footsteps paused at Dorothy's bedroom doorway, always a moment of hesitation, as if Vanessa was scanning the room for opportunities. From her chair in the living room, Dorothy could hear every sound emanating from her bedroom with startling clarity. Vanessa's footsteps moved first toward the window, presumably to check on the non-existent sick fern. Then they shifted toward the antique dresser where Dorothy kept her most precious belongings. The sound of wood sliding against wood told Dorothy that Vanessa was opening the top drawer of her dresser. This drawer contained Dorothy's jewelry collection, nothing extraordinarily valuable by insurance standards, but pieces with immense sentimental worth. Her mother's pearl earrings, the turquoise bracelet from her honeymoon, the silver locket with photos of her sons as children. Dorothy could hear the soft metallic sounds of jewelry being moved around, examined, evaluated. Vanessa was conducting an inventory, determining which pieces would be missed immediately and which could disappear without triggering immediate alarm. The drawer closed, followed by the opening of the second drawer. This one contained important papers, insurance documents, medical records, emergency cash Dorothy kept for unexpected expenses. The papers rustled as Vanessa rifled through them, presumably looking for financial information that could be useful for future exploitation. Most disturbing was the sound of Vanessa opening Dorothy's small cedar jewelry box, a gift from Gerald. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the box played a tiny music box melody when opened, a sweet tinkling tune that had always made Dorothy smile. Now the melody sounded ominous, like a funeral dirge for her privacy and security. After 15 minutes in the bedroom, Vanessa returned to the living room with her perfected mask of helpfulness firmly in place. "I moved that jade plant away from the window," she announced. "It was getting too much direct sunlight, and I organized some of the papers in your dresser. They were a bit scattered." Both statements were lies designed to cover her actual activities. The jade plant thrived in its sunny location and didn't need to be moved. The papers in Dorothy's dresser had been meticulously organized in a system she had developed over decades of library work, everything in its proper place, filed according to importance and frequency of use. "I also noticed you have quite a bit of cash in that drawer," Vanessa continued with false concern. "That's not really safe, Dorothy. Anyone could break in and steal it. Maybe you should consider putting it in the bank, or at least let Kevin help you manage your finances more actively." This was a classic manipulation technique: create a problem that didn't exist, then offer a solution that benefited the manipulator. Dorothy's modest emergency fund was perfectly safe in her locked dresser drawer, but Vanessa wanted access to Dorothy's financial resources and saw the cash as an easy target. "I appreciate your concern," Dorothy replied carefully, "but I like having some cash available for emergencies. It's a habit from when I was younger and checks took longer to clear. But at your age, with your eyesight, you could easily misplace money or forget where you put it," Vanessa pressed. "Last month, you thought some of your cash was missing, remember? Maybe it would be better if Kevin helped you keep track of these things." Dorothy felt a chill run down her spine. Vanessa was gaslighting her with surgical precision, using Dorothy's previous reports of missing money as evidence of confusion rather than acknowledgement of theft. She was rewriting history, making Dorothy's accurate observations sound like the fantasies of a declining mind. Kevin called that evening, his voice warm with genuine affection as it came through Dorothy's large button telephone. "Hi, Mom. Vanessa said she stopped by today and that you seemed a little confused about some of your belongings. She's worried about you." Dorothy gripped the phone receiver tighter, her knuckles white with frustration. Vanessa had gotten to Kevin first, framing the narrative before Dorothy could present her side of the story. This was strategic manipulation, poisoning the well before Dorothy could report what had actually happened. "I wasn't confused, Kevin," Dorothy said carefully. "I simply mentioned that some of my things have been moved around recently, Mom. You know your vision isn't what it used to be. Maybe some things seem moved when they're actually in the same place they've always been." Vanessa has experience with organization from her real estate work. "Maybe you should let her help you get more organized." There it was again, the assumption that visual impairment automatically meant cognitive impairment. Kevin loved his mother, but he had absorbed Vanessa's narrative that Dorothy's age and disability made her unreliable witness to her own experiences. "Kevin, I've been organizing things my entire adult life. I ran a library for 3 decades. I think I know when something has been moved in my own home." "I know, Mom. And you were great at your job, but that was before your vision problems started. Maybe it's time to accept some help instead of being so stubborn about maintaining your independence." Dorothy closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Vanessa's psychological campaign. Her daughter-in-law was systematically undermining Dorothy's credibility with her own son, using Kevin's love and concern as weapons against her. Every expression of competence was reframed as stubborn denial. Every accurate observation was dismissed as confusion. The next morning, Dorothy's longtime neighbor Carmen Rodriguez knocked on her front door with a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden. Carmen was 78, a widow who had lived next door for 25 years. And one of the few people who still treated Dorothy as a competent adult rather than a fragile invalid. "Those peppers are beautiful, Carmen," Dorothy said, accepting the basket with genuine gratitude. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." They settled in Dorothy's kitchen, the morning sun streaming through windows that Gerald had installed with special UV protective glass to help preserve Dorothy's remaining vision. Carmen stirred cream into her coffee with a thoughtful expression. "Dorothy, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay with your daughter-in-law? I've noticed she comes by very regularly, and yesterday I saw her carrying what looked like a bag of things to her car." Dorothy's heart skipped a beat. Carmen had witnessed something that could be evidence of Vanessa's thefts. What kind of bag? "A shopping bag from that expensive jewelry store in Scottsdale. It seemed odd because she was leaving your house with it, not arriving with it. I didn't want to pry, but I wondered if maybe she had borrowed some jewelry for an event or something." Dorothy felt a mixture of vindication and despair. Carmen had seen evidence of theft, but her interpretation was charitable, assuming Vanessa had borrowed items with permission rather than stolen them. This was exactly the kind of reasonable doubt that protected predators who chose their victims carefully. "I didn't loan her any jewelry," Dorothy said quietly. "In fact, I've noticed some pieces going missing recently." Carmen's expression shifted from casual concern to serious alarm. "Dorothy, are you saying you think she's taking things without permission?" "I'm saying things keep disappearing when she visits. And Kevin thinks I'm confused because of my vision problems." Carmen leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My late husband always said that bad people count on good people making excuses for them. What can I do to help?" That afternoon, Dorothy began what she would later call her evidence collection project. Using skills developed during 31 years of meticulous library record-keeping, she started documenting every interaction with Vanessa with scientific precision. She created a system using large print paper and a thick black marker, recording dates, times, duration of visits, items discussed, and items that went missing afterward. Her handwriting was shaky but legible, each entry a small building block in what she hoped would eventually become an unshakable case. Tuesday, October 15th, Vanessa arrived 2:15 p.m., left 3:45 p.m. Claimed to water plants and organize papers. After visit, missing small silver picture frame from nightstand, $40 cash from emergency envelope. Vanessa mentioned frame was cluttering the dresser top. Thursday, October 17th, Vanessa arrived 2:10 p.m., left 3:20 p.m. Said she was checking on my medication organization. After visit, missing a vintage fountain pen from desk drawer, another $20 from emergency fund. Pills were rearranged in different order than my system. Dorothy's librarian training had taught her that patterns were more powerful than individual incidents. One missing item could be misplacement. Multiple items disappearing during specific time frames suggested systematic theft. The following week, Vanessa volunteered to drive Dorothy to her monthly eye appointment with Dr. Peterson. This seemed like genuine helpfulness until Dorothy realized it gave Vanessa access to her medical information and the opportunity to speak privately with healthcare providers. In Dr. Peterson's waiting room, Vanessa positioned herself as Dorothy's primary caregiver, speaking about her as if she wasn't present. "Doctor, I'm really concerned about Dorothy's confusion lately," Vanessa told Dr. Peterson during the consultation. "She keeps thinking people are taking her things, getting paranoid about family members, forgetting conversations we've had. Is this normal with her condition?" Dorothy felt her face flush with anger and humiliation. Vanessa was weaponizing the medical appointment, using Dorothy's visual impairment to suggest cognitive decline that didn't exist. "Mrs. Ashford," Dr. Peterson said gently, "are you experiencing any memory difficulties or confusion?" "My memory is fine, doctor," Dorothy replied firmly. "What I'm experiencing is having my belongings disappear when certain people visit my home." Dr. Peterson glanced between Dorothy and Vanessa with obvious discomfort. "Sometimes vision problems can make it difficult to keep track of where we put things, doctor. I've had the same organizational system for 50 years. I know when something has been moved or taken." Vanessa jumped in smoothly. "She gets very defensive when we try to help her stay organized. I think she's embarrassed about needing assistance and covers it up by blaming others." Dorothy realized with crystal clarity that this was a coordinated attack on her credibility. Vanessa was building a narrative of cognitive decline that would make Dorothy's future reports of theft sound like the delusions of a confused elderly woman. 2 days later, Kevin called with news that made Dorothy's blood run cold. "Mom, Vanessa mentioned that you might need help managing your finances. She said you seemed confused about your bank balance and couldn't remember what bills you'd paid. Maybe it would be helpful if I came over this weekend and we could set up an easier system for you." Dorothy gripped the phone so tightly her arthritis flared in protest. "Kevin, I've been managing my own finances for 7 decades. My bank balance is exactly what I expect it to be, and my bills are paid on schedule through automatic withdrawal. I know you've always been independent, Mom. But maybe it's time to accept that you might need some help." Vanessa has experience with financial management from her business. She could set up a system that would be easier for someone with vision problems. The trap was closing around Dorothy like a steel cage. Vanessa was systematically undermining her credibility, positioning herself as the helpful daughter-in-law trying to care for a declining mother-in-law, while simultaneously gaining access to Dorothy's financial resources. "Kevin, I don't need help with my finances. What I need is for my belongings to stop disappearing when your wife visits." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Kevin spoke again, his voice was heavy with the kind of patience people use when dealing with difficult children or confused elderly relatives. "Mom, we've talked about this. You're not losing things. Sometimes when our vision changes, it can seem like things are missing when they're actually right where we left them. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Peterson about whether these concerns could be related to your eye condition." For the next 45 minutes, Dorothy laid out everything: Vanessa's systematic thefts, the psychological manipulation, Kevin's unwitting participation in discrediting his own mother, the previous day's major robbery, including the theft of Gerald's entire coin collection. Carmen listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "Dorothy, this isn't just theft. This is elder abuse. This is exactly what happened to my sister Rosa in Tucson before we intervened. The daughter-in-law, the gradual isolation, the family members who don't believe the victim because the abuser seems so helpful and caring. Carmen stood up abruptly and walked to her kitchen window, looking out at Dorothy's house with new understanding. That explains why she always parks her car at an angle where it's hard to see what she's loading and unloading, and why she only comes when most of the neighbors are at work. She's been planning this very carefully. Dorothy felt a rush of validation. Carmen believed her. After months of being treated like a confused old woman who couldn't trust her own perceptions, someone was finally acknowledging that Dorothy's observations were accurate and her concerns were legitimate. Carmen proved to be an invaluable ally in ways Dorothy hadn't expected. As a retired bookkeeper who had managed financial records for several small businesses, Carmen understood the importance of creating unshakable documentation. "We need to approach this like a legal case from day one," Carmen explained, pulling out a digital camera and a notebook. "Every piece of evidence needs to be photographed, dated, and cataloged. Every conversation needs to be recorded if possible. Every witness statement needs to be written down while memories are fresh." They spent the morning photographing Dorothy's ransacked bedroom from every angle. Carmen meticulously documented each open drawer, each scattered paper, each sign of Vanessa's frantic search. The photographs would serve as proof that someone had conducted a thorough and destructive search of Dorothy's private belongings. This level of disturbance isn't consistent with someone looking for specific papers, Carmen observed, studying the scattered contents of Dorothy's dresser through her camera lens. This looks like someone searching for anything valuable they could find quickly. Carmen also helped Dorothy create a comprehensive inventory of missing items, complete with estimated values and detailed descriptions. Gerald's coin collection alone represented a felony-level theft, but the cumulative value of everything Vanessa had stolen over the months pushed the total well into five-figure territory. "Dorothy, you need to understand that what you're describing isn't just theft, it's organized criminal activity. She's working with at least one accomplice. She's conducting identity fraud by photographing your financial documents. And she's engaging in psychological manipulation designed to discredit you as a witness. This is sophisticated crime." Carmen's next suggestion surprised Dorothy but proved to be brilliant. "We need to talk to the other neighbors. I guarantee you that Vanessa's behavior has been noticed by more people than just me. Criminals think they're invisible, but neighbors pay attention to unusual patterns, especially in a close-knit community like ours." Their first stop was the house directly across the street, where Martha and Joe Kowalski had lived for 38 years. Martha answered the door with paint-stained hands and a welcoming smile that faded quickly when she saw the serious expressions on Dorothy and Carmen's faces. "We need to ask you about something sensitive," Carmen began. "Have you noticed anything unusual about Dorothy's daughter-in-law's visits?" Martha and Joe exchanged meaningful glances before Martha spoke. "We've been concerned for months, but we didn't want to interfere in family business. That woman comes by very regularly, always when most people are at work, and she stays for long periods. We've seen her loading things into her car several times. But we assumed Dorothy was giving her items or maybe clearing out old belongings." Joe nodded gravely. "Last month, I saw her carrying what looked like a small piece of furniture to her car, and yesterday, she was there for over an hour with a big canvas bag that looked heavy when she carried it out. But what really bothered us," Martha continued, "was how she always looks around before she goes into the house and when she comes out, like she's checking to see if anyone is watching. It reminded me of how burglars behave on those crime shows." Dorothy felt another wave of validation. The neighbors had been noticing Vanessa's suspicious behavior for months but had hesitated to interfere because they assumed it was legitimate family business. James Morrison, the postal worker who had served Mesquite Lane for 12 years, provided perhaps the most damning evidence of all. Carmen suggested they wait for him during his usual afternoon delivery route to ask about his observations. James was a thoughtful man in his 40s who took pride in knowing his customers and watching out for the elderly residents on his route. When Carmen and Dorothy approached him about Vanessa's visits, his expression became troubled. "Mrs. Ashford, I've been worried about those visits for a while now. That woman has asked me several times about your mail delivery schedule and whether you get many packages or financial statements. She claimed she was trying to help you manage your mail better, but something about her questions felt wrong. James looked around carefully before continuing. And twice, I've seen her going through your mailbox before knocking on your door. She claimed she was helping organize your mail. But postal workers know the difference between legitimate assistance and mail tampering. I've been documenting the dates and times because I suspected something wasn't right. Dorothy's hands trembled as she wrote down James's observations. Mail tampering was a federal crime, and Vanessa's behavior suggested she might be intercepting financial statements or other sensitive documents. There's something else, James said quietly. Last Tuesday, I saw her taking photographs of some of your mail before she brought it to your door. She didn't know I was watching from the next street over. But I could clearly see her using her phone to photograph envelopes before putting them back in your mailbox. Carmen's suggestion that evening changed everything. Dorothy, we need to catch her in the act. We need video evidence that will be impossible for anyone to dismiss or explain away. But how? I can't operate a camera, and even if I could, she'd notice if I was trying to film her. Carmen smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had already thought 3 steps ahead. My grandson works in security. For the next 45 minutes, Dorothy laid out everything: Vanessa's systematic thefts, the psychological manipulation, Kevin's unwitting participation in discrediting his own mother, the previous day's major robbery, including the theft of Gerald's entire coin collection. Carmen listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. Dorothy, this isn't just theft. This is elder abuse. This is exactly what happened to my sister Rosa in Tucson before we intervened. The daughter-in-law. The gradual isolation, the family members who don't believe the victim because the abuser seems so helpful and caring. Carmen stood up abruptly and walked to her kitchen window, looking out at Dorothy's house with new understanding. That explains why she always parks her car at an angle where it's hard to see what she's loading and unloading, and why she only comes when most of the neighbors are at work. She's been planning this very carefully. Dorothy felt a rush of validation. Carmen believed her. After months of being treated like a confused old woman who couldn't trust her own perceptions, someone was finally acknowledging that Dorothy's observations were accurate and her concerns were legitimate. Carmen proved to be an invaluable ally in ways Dorothy hadn't expected. As a retired bookkeeper who had managed financial records for several small businesses, Carmen understood the importance of creating unshakable documentation. We need to approach this like a legal case from day one, Carmen explained, pulling out a digital camera and a notebook. Every piece of evidence needs to be photographed, dated, and cataloged. Every conversation needs to be recorded if possible. Every witness statement needs to be written down while memories are fresh. They spent the morning photographing Dorothy's ransacked bedroom from every angle. Carmen meticulously documented each open drawer, each scattered paper, each sign of Vanessa's frantic search. The photographs would serve as proof that someone had conducted a thorough and destructive search of Dorothy's private belongings. This level of disturbance isn't consistent with someone looking for specific papers, Carmen observed, studying the scattered contents of Dorothy's dresser through her camera lens. This looks like someone searching for anything valuable they could find quickly. Carmen also helped Dorothy create a comprehensive inventory of missing items, complete with estimated values and detailed descriptions. Gerald's coin collection alone represented a felony-level theft, but the cumulative value of everything Vanessa had stolen over the months pushed the total well into 5-figure territory. Dorothy, you need to understand that what you're describing isn't just theft, it's organized criminal activity. She's working with at least one accomplice. She's conducting identity fraud by photograph. The following Tuesday, Vanessa's visit took on a more aggressive tone. She arrived with a notebook and announced that she was going to help Dorothy create an inventory of her valuables for insurance purposes. It's important to have records of everything you own, Vanessa explained, already moving toward Dorothy's bedroom without waiting for permission. Especially for someone in your situation. If something were to happen to you, Kevin would need to know what's here for estate planning. Dorothy felt a chill of recognition. Vanessa was conducting a professional assessment of stealable assets while disguising it as helpful insurance planning. She was cataloging Dorothy's belongings like a burglar casing a house. From the living room, Dorothy could hear Vanessa opening drawers, moving items, making notes. She was being methodical and thorough, taking photographs with her phone under the pretense of creating insurance documentation. "You have some lovely pieces in here," Vanessa called out. "This turquoise bracelet is particularly nice, very Southwest style. Where did it come from?" "It was a gift from my late husband during our honeymoon in Santa Fe," Dorothy replied. Well, you should probably consider keeping your most valuable jewelry in a safety deposit box. It's not secure to leave it sitting in a bedroom dresser, where anyone could take it." The irony was staggering. The person actively stealing Dorothy's jewelry was advising her to protect it from thieves. Over the following weeks, Dorothy began to notice a disturbing pattern in her social interactions. Friends from her library days stopped calling as frequently. Neighbors seemed more distant during chance encounters. Even her weekly grocery delivery driver, who had always been chatty and friendly, began treating her with the careful politeness reserved for people who might not be entirely reliable. Dorothy realized that Vanessa was conducting a whisper campaign, spreading concerns about Dorothy's declining mental state throughout her social network. She was systematically isolating Dorothy from potential allies and witnesses, creating a narrative that would make any future accusations sound like the paranoid fantasies of a confused elderly woman. The strategy was brilliant and ruthless. By the time Dorothy was ready to report Vanessa's crimes, who would believe her? A woman with significant visual impairment, living alone, possibly experiencing age-related confusion according to her own daughter-in-law's concerned reports to medical professionals and community members. Dorothy felt the walls closing in around her. But she also felt something else stirring in the depths of her soul, the same fierce determination that had helped her stand up to bullying school board members who tried to cut library funding, the same protective instincts that had made her fight for vulnerable students who needed academic support, the same quiet strength that had sustained her through decades of challenges. Vanessa thought she was hunting a helpless prey animal. She was about to discover she had cornered a lioness who had simply been choosing her moment to strike back. The game was about to change. And Dorothy Ashford was about to show everyone what happened when you mistake kindness for weakness and assume that silence means surrender. Dorothy began planning her counterattack with the same methodical precision that had made her legendary among library staff for solving complex organizational problems. Vanessa had been patient in her predatory campaign, but Dorothy was about to demonstrate what real patience looked like when combined with strategic thinking and an absolute refusal to be anyone's victim. The desert sun set behind the mountains outside Dorothy's window, casting long shadows across her living room. In the growing darkness, Dorothy smiled for the first time in months. Tomorrow, she would begin gathering the evidence that would end Vanessa's reign of theft and manipulation forever. The hunter was about to become the hunted. October 29th dawned crisp and clear in Willowbrook, with the kind of desert morning that made Dorothy remember why she and Gerald had chosen to build their life in Arizona. The temperature was a perfect 72 degrees, the air was dry and clean, and the saguaro cacti in her backyard stood like ancient sentinels against the brilliant blue sky. It should have been a beautiful day. Instead, it would become the day that changed everything. Dorothy had spent the morning reorganizing her jewelry collection, a task that required intense concentration and systematic methodology. Each piece had to be examined by touch, identified by weight and texture, and placed in its designated compartment within the antique wooden jewelry box that Gerald had given her for their 15th anniversary. The process took nearly 2 hours. But when she finished, every item was exactly where it belonged according to the organizational system she had perfected over decades. The pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother sat in the upper left velvet compartment. The turquoise bracelet from her Santa Fe honeymoon occupied its place in the center section. Her wedding ring set, which she had stopped wearing after Gerald's death, but treasured beyond measure, rested in the special compartment lined with white silk. Everything was accounted for, catalogued, and properly positioned. At 11:30 a.m., Dorothy made herself a cup of chamomile tea and settled into her reading chair with an audiobook about desert botany. The narrator's soothing voice described the adaptive strategies of various cacti species, and Dorothy found herself absorbed in the scientific explanations of how these remarkable plants survived in harsh conditions. Perhaps there was something metaphorical about their resilience that spoke to her current situation. The peaceful morning was shattered at exactly 1:47 p.m. by the unexpected sound of a car door slamming. In her driveway, Dorothy paused the audiobook and listened carefully. Vanessa wasn't scheduled to visit until Thursday, and Kevin never stopped by during work hours without calling first. The footsteps approaching her front door were definitely Vanessa's. The distinctive click of expensive heels on flagstone was unmistakable. But something was different about the rhythm. Instead of the usual confident stride, these footsteps were hurried, almost frantic. Vanessa was walking faster than usual, and she seemed to be looking around nervously as she approached the house. The knock on Dorothy's door was sharp and impatient. 3 quick raps followed immediately by the sound of the doorbell. This was not Vanessa's usual polite announcement of arrival. Something had changed, and Dorothy felt her internal alarm systems activate as she made her way to the front door. "Dorothy, it's me," Vanessa called out before Dorothy could even reach for the doorknob. "I need to come in for just a minute. Kevin asked me to pick up some papers he left here last week." This was a lie. Kevin hadn't been to Dorothy's house in over 2 weeks, and he certainly hadn't left any papers behind. Dorothy knew this with absolute certainty because she had developed the habit of thoroughly checking for forgotten items after every visitor. But she opened the door anyway, curious to see what Vanessa's real purpose might be. "Vanessa, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting you until Thursday." Vanessa pushed past Dorothy into the house without waiting for an invitation, her movements agitated and purposeful. She was dressed differently than usual, instead of her typical carefully coordinated outfit. She wore dark jeans, a black sweater, and running shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she carried a large canvas tote bag instead of her usual designer purse. "I'm sorry to barge in like this, but I'm in a bit of a hurry," Vanessa said, already moving toward the hallway that led to Dorothy's bedroom. "Kevin needs those documents for a meeting this afternoon, and he asked me to grab them quickly while I was running errands in the neighborhood." Another lie. Kevin worked in construction management, and Dorothy couldn't imagine what documents he would need from her house for a business meeting. But she decided to play along, sensing that something important was about to happen. "Of course, dear. What kind of documents are you looking for?" "Oh, just some old insurance papers. Something about the house warranty. You know how Kevin is about keeping detailed records." Vanessa was moving quickly down the hallway, her footsteps no longer attempting to be quiet or respectful. She was in Dorothy's bedroom within seconds, and the sounds that followed were unlike anything Dorothy had heard during previous visits. From her position in the living room, Dorothy could hear Vanessa tearing through her bedroom with unprecedented urgency. Drawers were being yanked open and slammed shut. Papers were being shuffled frantically. The sounds of items being moved, examined, and tossed aside created a chaotic symphony that made Dorothy's blood run cold. This wasn't careful, methodical theft. This was desperate looting. Dorothy moved quietly toward her bedroom doorway, using her intimate knowledge of the house's layout to approach without making noise. Her stocking feet made no sound on the hallway carpet, and she positioned herself just outside the bedroom where she could hear everything clearly. The sounds coming from her room were alarming. Vanessa was going through Dorothy's belongings with the frantic energy of someone operating under severe time pressure. The antique dresser drawers were being opened and closed in rapid succession. Papers were rustling as they were scattered and discarded. Most disturbing of all, Dorothy could hear the distinctive sound of her jewelry box being opened and items being removed. "Where is it?" she heard Vanessa mutter under her breath. "It has to be here somewhere. She's too old and blind to have hidden it anywhere clever." Dorothy's heart began racing. Vanessa was looking for something specific, something valuable enough to risk this bold daylight raid on Dorothy's bedroom. And her casual dismissal of Dorothy's intelligence was both insulting and revealing. Vanessa truly believed that age and visual impairment made do. Dorothy helpless and stupid. 20 minutes into her frantic search, Vanessa made a sound of triumph, a small aha, that carried clearly down the hallway to where Dorothy stood listening. Finally, Vanessa said, apparently speaking to herself, Gerald's old coin collection. Kevin said his father had been collecting silver dollars for years before he died. These have got to be worth thousands by now. Dorothy felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Gerald's coin collection was one of his most treasured possessions. Carefully assembled over 30 years of patient collecting, he had specialized in Morgan silver dollars and peace dollars from the early 20th century, building a collection that was indeed worth several $1,000s. But more importantly, it represented decades of Gerald's passion, research, and careful curation. The collection was stored in a special wooden case that Gerald had built himself, with individual slots for each coin, and detailed documentation of their dates, mint marks, and estimated values. Dorothy had kept the collection in her bedroom closet, wrapped in soft cloth and tucked away safely where casual visitors would never think to look. These old coins are perfect, Vanessa continued, apparently talking to herself as she worked. She probably doesn't even remember that Gerald collected them. And even if she notices they're missing, Kevin will just think she forgot where she put them. Old people with vision problems lose track of things all the time. Dorothy listened in horror as Vanessa systematically looted Gerald's life work. She could hear individual coins being examined and sorted, the wooden case being disassembled, and items being placed into what must have been the canvas tote bag. As Vanessa continued her theft, Dorothy heard her cell phone ring. Vanessa answered immediately, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. "It's me," Vanessa said. "I'm at the old lady's house now, getting the stuff we talked about. Yes, I found the coin collection. You were right, there must be 50 or 60 coins here. No, she can't see what I'm doing. She's practically blind, and she trusts me completely. I should have everything loaded up in about 10 more minutes." Dorothy strained to hear more of the conversation, but Vanessa had lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. However, she caught fragments that made her blood run cold. "The jewelry is mostly junk. But there are a few good pieces. The turquoise bracelet might be worth something. Yes, I already cleaned out most of her cash over the past few months. She never suspects anything because Kevin thinks she's getting senile." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Vanessa providing what sounded like a status report to an accomplice. Dorothy realized with growing horror that this wasn't a solo operation. Vanessa was working with at least one other person in a coordinated effort to systematically rob Dorothy of everything valuable she owned. "We'll need to be more careful after today," Vanessa was saying. "I think I can keep Kevin convinced that she's losing her memory for a few more months, but we should grab the big stuff now while we still can." "Yes. I'll check for any valuable papers or bank information while I'm here." After ending her phone call, Vanessa's search became even more systematic and thorough. Dorothy could hear her going through the file box where important papers were stored: insurance policies, bank statements, property deeds, and investment records that Gerald had meticulously organized before his death. "Bingo," Vanessa said with satisfaction. "Bank account numbers, investment portfolios, insurance beneficiaries. This old bet has way more money than Kevin realizes." Dorothy heard papers being photographed, the distinctive sound of a camera phone taking multiple pictures in rapid succession. Vanessa was documenting Dorothy's financial information, presumably to enable future fraud or identity theft. "Kevin's going to be so surprised when he finds out how much his mommy is really worth," Vanessa muttered. "Too bad for him that I'm going to be long gone before he figures out what happened to most of it." The implications of this statement hit Dorothy like a physical blow. Vanessa wasn't just stealing from Dorothy, she was planning to disappear entirely, taking Dorothy's valuables and leaving Kevin to deal with the aftermath. She was betraying both Dorothy and Kevin simultaneously, using Kevin's love for his mother and his wife as weapons against both of them. Vanessa's search expanded to include Dorothy's medical records, which were kept in a separate file folder. Clearly labeled Medical, Dorothy Ashford. Perfect, Vanessa said as she rifled through doctors' reports, prescription information, and insurance forms. Macular degeneration, arthritis, high blood pressure. She's got enough medical problems that nobody will be surprised if she starts making mistakes with her finances or forgetting where she put things. Dorothy realized that Vanessa was Dorothy moved quietly toward her bedroom doorway, using her intimate knowledge of the house's layout to approach without making noise. Her stocking feet made no sound on the hallway carpet, and she positioned herself just outside the bedroom where she could hear everything clearly. The sounds coming from her room were alarming. Vanessa was going through Dorothy's belongings with the frantic energy of someone operating under severe time pressure. The antique dresser drawers were being opened and closed in rapid succession. Papers were rustling as they were scattered and discarded. Most disturbing of all, Dorothy could hear the distinctive sound of her jewelry box being opened and items being removed. "Where is it?" she heard Vanessa mutter under her breath. "It has to be here somewhere. She's too old and blind to have hidden it anywhere clever." Dorothy's heart began racing. Vanessa was looking for something specific, something valuable enough to risk this bold daylight raid on Dorothy's bedroom. And her casual dismissal of Dorothy's intelligence was both insulting and revealing. Vanessa truly believed that age and visual impairment made Dorothy helpless and stupid. 20 minutes into her frantic search, Vanessa made a sound of triumph, a small aha, that carried clearly down the hallway to where Dorothy stood listening. "Finally," Vanessa said, apparently speaking to herself, "Gerald's old coin collection." Kevin said his father had been collecting silver dollars for years before he died. "These have got to be worth thousands by now." Dorothy felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Gerald's coin collection was one of his most treasured possessions. Carefully assembled over 30 years of patient collecting, he had specialized in Morgan silver dollars and piece dollars from the early 20th century, building a collection that was indeed worth several $1,000s. But more importantly, it represented decades of Gerald's passion, research, and careful curation. The collection was stored in a special wooden case that Gerald had built himself, with individual slots for each coin and detailed documentation of their dates, mint marks, and estimated values. Dorothy had kept the collection in her bedroom closet, wrapped in soft cloth and tucked away safely where casual visitors would never think to look. "These old coins are perfect," Vanessa continued, apparently talking to herself as she worked. She probably doesn't even remember that Gerald collected them. And even if she notices they're missing, Kevin will just think she forgot where she put them. Old people with vision problems lose track of things all the time. Dorothy listened in horror as Vanessa systematically looted Gerald's life work. She could hear individual coins being examined and sorted, the wooden case being disassembled, and items being placed into what must have been the canvas tote bag. As Vanessa continued her theft, Dorothy heard her cell phone ring. Vanessa answered immediately, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. "It's me," Vanessa said. "I'm at the old lady's house now, getting the stuff we talked about." "Yes, I found the coin collection." "You were right. There must be 50 or 60 coins here." "No, she can't see what I'm doing. She's practically blind, and she trusts me completely. I should have everything loaded up in about 10 more minutes." Dorothy strained to hear more of the conversation, but Vanessa had lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. However, she caught fragments that made her blood run. Dorothy could hear the lies rolling off Vanessa's tongue with practiced ease, even now, after committing the most brazen theft of her criminal campaign. Vanessa maintained her facade of helpful concern. "I also noticed that you have quite a few valuable items just sitting around loose in your bedroom," Vanessa continued. "You should really consider putting some of those things in a safe deposit box. With your vision problems, you might not notice if someone broke in and took them." The audacity was breathtaking. The person who had just spent an hour stealing Dorothy's most precious possessions was advising her to protect them from thieves. After Vanessa left, Dorothy sat in her chair for several minutes, listening to the sound of the BMW driving away down Mesquite Lane. Then she rose carefully and made her way to her bedroom to assess the damage. The scene that greeted her was devastating. Her dresser drawers had been left partially open, with contents scattered and disorganized. Her jewelry box sat empty except for a few inexpensive pieces that Vanessa had apparently deemed worthless. The file box containing her important papers had been rifled through, with documents scattered across the bed. Most heartbreaking of all, Gerald's coin collection was completely gone. The wooden case he had built with his own hands sat empty on the closet floor, stripped of the silver dollars he had collected with such care and passion, 30 years of patient collecting. Erased in a single afternoon of greed, Dorothy's hands shook as she surveyed the destruction, but her mind remained crystal clear. This was the moment she had been unconsciously preparing for, the undeniable proof that Vanessa was not a concerned daughter-in-law but a calculating thief, who viewed Dorothy as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. With the methodical precision that had made her legendary among library staff, Dorothy began documenting the crime scene. She moved through her bedroom carefully, cataloging every missing item, every disturbed drawer, every sign of Vanessa's frantic search. Using her large print notebook and thick black marker, Dorothy created a detailed inventory. October 29th, Vanessa's unscheduled visit. 1:47 p.m. to 3:15 p.m. missing items. Complete coin collection approximately 60 Morgan and piece. Silver dollars, estimated value $8,000, $12,000. Mother's pearl earrings, turquoise bracelet from honeymoon, silver locket with children's photos, jade retirement plant from library staff, ceramic bird made by Michael. Age 7, emergency cash envelope approximately $180, various family photographs, evidence of search, all dresser drawers opened and contents scattered, file box searched, papers photographed, medical records examined, closet searched thoroughly, bedroom furniture moved. Dorothy's librarian training had taught her that documentation was the foundation of any successful investigation. Every detail mattered, every piece of evidence contributed to the larger picture of systematic criminal behavior. That evening, Dorothy called Kevin with a heavy heart. She knew that reporting Vanessa's theft would likely destroy Kevin's marriage and shatter his trust in the woman he loved. But she also knew that remaining silent would enable Vanessa to continue her criminal behavior, potentially expand her targeting to other vulnerable victims. Kevin, I need to tell you something important about Vanessa's visit today. Visit? Mom, Vanessa didn't visit you today. She's been with me all afternoon working on wedding plans for her friend's ceremony next month. Dorothy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Vanessa had constructed an alibi, ensuring that Kevin could provide her with a false timeline that would discredit Dorothy's account of the theft. Kevin. She was here from about 1:45 until after 3 o'clock. She said you had asked her to pick up some papers you had left here. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Kevin spoke again, his voice carried the careful patience of someone dealing with a confused elderly relative. Mom, I haven't been to your house in weeks, and I certainly didn't leave any papers there. Are you sure someone was at your house today? Maybe you heard noises from outside and thought someone was inside. Dorothy closed her eyes, realizing that Vanessa had outmaneuvered her again by creating a false alibi and framing Dorothy's accurate report as confusion. Vanessa had made it impossible for Dorothy to report the theft without sounding delusional. Kevin, someone was in my house today and took many of my valuable belongings, including your father's entire coin collection. Mom, Dad's coin collection is probably still exactly where it's always been. Your vision problems might make it hard to find things in their usual places. Why don't I come over this weekend and help you look for everything you think is missing? Dorothy realized with crystal clarity that this was the moment everything changed. Vanessa's theft had been so bold, so thorough, and so carefully planned that it could not be explained away as misunderstanding or coincidence. The missing items were valuable enough and numerous enough that their absence would be undeniable when properly documented. But more importantly, Dorothy finally understood the full scope of Vanessa's criminal enterprise. This wasn't just theft, it was elder abuse, identity fraud, family manipulation, and financial exploitation all rolled into a single, coordinated campaign designed to systematically strip Dorothy of her independence, her resources, and her credibility. The game had changed. The stakes had escalated beyond simple theft to wholesale victimization. And Dorothy Ashford was about to demonstrate that choosing the wrong victim could be a predator's most fatal mistake. Tomorrow, Dorothy would begin fighting back with every skill, every resource, and every ounce of determination she had developed over 73 years of life. Vanessa thought she had just committed the perfect crime against a helpless victim. She was about to discover that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Dorothy spent the night of October 29th sitting in Gerald's old recliner. Wrapped in the quilt her mother had stitched by hand 60 years ago, sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear Vanessa's voice echoing through the house. "She's too old and blind to have hidden it anywhere clever." The casual cruelty of those words burned in Dorothy's memory like acid. By 4 a.m., Dorothy had made a decision that would change everything. She would not be anyone's victim. She would not allow Vanessa to steal her life piece by piece while convincing the world that Dorothy was too confused to know what was happening to her. And most importantly, she would not let Gerald's memory be dishonored by allowing his treasured coin collection to disappear into the hands of criminals. As the desert sunrise painted her living room walls gold and orange, Dorothy began planning her counterattack with the same methodical precision that had made her legendary among library staff for solving impossible organizational problems. She opened a fresh notebook, one with extra-large lines and heavy paper that would hold up to extensive use, and began writing in thick black ink, Operation Truth Strategic Plan to Stop Vanessa Hartwell Phase 1, Evidence Collection Phase 2, Ally Recruitment Phase 3, Professional Support Phase 4, Legal Documentation Phase 5. Just as Dorothy smiled grimly as she reviewed her outline, Vanessa thought she was dealing with a helpless old woman. She was about to discover that she had declared war on someone who had spent 3 decades teaching people how to research, organize, and solve complex problems. At exactly 8 a.m., Dorothy walked carefully across her front yard to Carmen Rodriguez's house. The morning air was crisp and clean, scented with the blooming Palo Verde trees that lined Mesquite Lane. Carmen's house was a mirror image of Dorothy's. The same adobe-style architecture, the same red tile roof, the same desert landscaping that required minimal water and maximum respect for the natural environment. Carmen answered her door wearing a flour-dusted apron and the concerned expression of someone who had been watching her neighbor's house with growing worry. "Dorothy, I was just thinking about calling you. I saw that woman at your house yesterday for a very long time, and when she left, she was carrying what looked like a very heavy bag. Is everything all right, Carmen? I need your help with something very serious. May I come in?" They settled in Carmen's kitchen, which smelled of fresh tortillas and strong coffee. Carmen poured 2 cups without asking, adding the exact amount of cream she had learned Dorothy preferred over 25 years of friendship. This small gesture of remembered kindness nearly brought tears to Dorothy's eyes. It had been so long since someone had treated her preferences as worthy of attention and memory. "Carmen, I need to tell you something that's going to sound unbelievable, but I need you to listen with an open mind." Sarah explained that Arizona had strong elder abuse statutes that carried serious criminal penalties and allowed for civil recovery of damages beyond the original theft amounts. "The key is building an airtight case that can't be dismissed as family misunderstanding or dismissed due to the victim's age or disability. Your documentation approach is excellent, and the video evidence will be crucial. But we also need to consider your personal safety." "My safety, Mrs. Ashford? You're threatening a criminal enterprise that may have already stolen tens of thousands of dollars from you. If Vanessa realizes that you're building a case against her, she might escalate to more dangerous behavior. We need to involve law enforcement sooner rather than later." Sarah provided Dorothy with contact information for Detective Martinez, a specialist in financial crimes against elderly victims. She also gave Dorothy a small recording device disguised as a pen, explaining that Arizona was a single-party consent state where Dorothy could legally record any conversation she was part of. Your goal now is to document everything while staying safe, Sarah advised. Let Vanessa continue her routine visits, but make sure everything is being recorded. The more evidence we gather, the stronger the criminal case will be. Carmen suggested one more crucial step: getting medical documentation of Dorothy's mental competence to counter any attempts by Vanessa to claim that Dorothy was confused or delusional. Dr. Elena Vasquez was a geriatrician who specialized in cognitive assessments for elderly patients. Her office was decorated with soothing dessert artwork and comfortable furniture designed for patients with mobility limitations. Mrs. Ashford, I understand you're concerned about family members questioning your mental competence. Dorothy explained the situation carefully, emphasizing Vanessa's attempts to convince medical professionals that Dorothy was experiencing memory loss and confusion. Dr. Vasquez conducted a thorough cognitive assessment that included memory tests, problem-solving exercises, and detailed questions about Dorothy's daily activities and self-care abilities. The results were unequivocal. Mrs. Ashford, your cognitive function is excellent for someone of any age, let alone someone in their 70s. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning is clear, and your ability to organize complex information is exceptional. I would be happy to provide written documentation of your mental competence should it become necessary for legal proceedings. Dr. Vasquez also reviewed Dorothy's medical records and confirmed that macular degeneration had no connection to cognitive function or memory problems. Vision loss can actually improve other cognitive abilities as the brain adapts and becomes more reliant on alternative senses. In your case, your visual impairment seems to have enhanced your attention to detail and your ability to process auditory information. Anyone suggesting that your vision problems affect your mental competence is either ignorant or deliberately misleading. Sarah Chen had mentioned a support group for elder abuse victims that met weekly at the Willowbrook Community Center. Carmen volunteered to drive Dorothy to a meeting, and the experience proved both educational and emotionally healing. The group was led by Frank Martinez, a retired police detective who had specialized in crimes against elderly victims. The 8 regular members ranged in age from their 60s to their 80s, and their stories were both heartbreaking and inspiring. Financial exploitation by family members is the most common form of elder abuse, Frank explained. Children, grandchildren, caregivers, and in-laws who see elderly relatives as sources of easy money rather than people deserving respect and protection. Dorothy listened to stories remarkably similar to her own. Ruth, age 76, had been systematically robbed by her grandson's girlfriend who convinced everyone that Ruth was becoming forgetful. Bill, 82, had lost over $40,000 to a son-in-law who had gained access to his bank accounts under the guise of helping with financial management. The key to stopping these predators, Frank continued, is documentation, witnesses, and refusing to be isolated. They count on their victims being too embarrassed to report the crimes and too isolated to get help building a case. The group members shared practical advice about evidence collection, legal resources, and emotional coping strategies. Most importantly, they provided Dorothy with the validation she desperately needed, confirmation that she wasn't paranoid, confused, or overly suspicious. You're doing everything right, Ruth told Dorothy after the meeting. The hardest part is realizing that someone you trusted is deliberately hurting you. Once you accept that reality, you can start fighting back effectively. That evening, Dorothy and Carmen sat in Dorothy's living room reviewing everything they had accomplished in just 4 days. The transformation was remarkable. Dorothy had gone from an isolated victim to the center of a support network dedicated to helping her seek justice. Let's review what we have so far, Carmen said, consulting her meticulous notes, evidence collected, detailed inventory of stolen items with estimated values, photographs of ransacked bedroom, witness statements from 3 neighbors, testimony from postal worker about mail tampering, video surveillance system installed and operational. Medical documentation of mental competence. Legal consultation completed. Support network established. Carmen as primary ally and documentation assistant. Neighbors committed to serving as witnesses. Postal worker providing federal crime evidence. Attorney specializing in elder abuse cases. Detective referral for criminal investigation. Support group for ongoing emotional assistance. Next steps planned. Allow Vanessa to continue visits while cameras record everything. Document any new thefts or suspicious behavior. Gather additional evidence of accomplice involvement. Prepare for formal criminal complaint. Protect Dorothy's remaining assets from further theft. Dorothy, in less than a week, you've built a case that any prosecutor would be thrilled to take to court, Carmen said with satisfaction. Vanessa thinks she's been the hunter in this relationship, but she's about to discover that she's become the prey. Dorothy smiled for the first time since Gerald's death with genuine joy rather than just politeness. For months, she had felt powerless, isolated, and dismissed. Now she was surrounded by allies who believed her, supported her, and were committed to helping her achieve justice. Carmen, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done to help me. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we see Vanessa in handcuffs. Dorothy laughed, a sound she hadn't made in months. Tomorrow, Vanessa would arrive for her regular Thursday visit, expecting to find the same helpless victim she had been exploiting for months. Instead, she would walk into a carefully prepared trap that would document every word she spoke, every item she touched, and every crime she committed. The cameras would be watching. The evidence would be preserved, and Dorothy Ashford would finally have the proof she needed to destroy the person who had tried to destroy her. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and Dorothy had spent a lifetime learning how to be very, very patient when pursuing something important. Vanessa's reign of terror was about to end. Thursday, November 7th arrived with the kind of perfect Arizona weather that made Dorothy remember why she and Gerald had chosen to spend their lives in the desert. The morning temperature was a crisp 68 degrees, the sky was an endless expanse of cloudless blue, and the saguaro cacti in her backyard stood like ancient guardians preparing to witness justice. Finally being served, Dorothy sat in her favorite armchair at exactly 2 p.m., 15 minutes before Vanessa's scheduled arrival. The hidden cameras were recording, the audio system was active, and Dorothy wore the pen recorder that Sarah Chen had provided. Carmen was positioned at her kitchen window next door, ready to serve as a witness and call for help if needed. Detective Martinez was on standby, waiting for Dorothy's call with the evidence they needed for an arrest warrant. Everything was in place. After months of being victimized, manipulated, and dismissed, Dorothy was finally ready to spring the trap that would end Vanessa's criminal career forever. The sound of the BMW pulling into the driveway at exactly 2:15 p.m. sent a thrill of anticipation through Dorothy's body. Today would be different. Today, every word Vanessa spoke would be recorded. Every item she touched would be documented. Every crime she committed would be preserved in high-definition video that no court could dismiss or ignore. Vanessa's knock was as punctual and predictable as always. 3 sharp raps followed by the cheerful call. "Dorothy, it's me." Dorothy opened the door with a welcoming smile that concealed the steel determination beneath. "Vanessa, dear, right on time as always. Come in." Vanessa swept into the house with her usual confidence, bringing the overwhelming scent of expensive perfume and the barely concealed impatience that Dorothy had learned to recognize. But today, Dorothy noticed something different. Vanessa seemed more agitated than usual, her movements slightly more hurried, her smile more forced. "How are you feeling today, Dorothy? Any problems with your medications or your vision?" "I'm doing quite well, thank you, though I have been a little concerned about some items that seem to have gone missing recently." Dorothy watched Vanessa's reaction carefully. The younger woman's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, and her hand moved unconsciously to adjust her purse strap, a nervous gesture that Dorothy had learned to recognize as a sign of guilt. "Oh, what kind of items? You know how easy it is to misplace things when you can't see clearly." There it was, the immediate dismissal of Dorothy's concerns. The assumption that visual impairment meant cognitive impairment. But this time, Dorothy was ready with a response calculated to make Vanessa reveal more than she intended. "Well, I seem to be missing some jewelry and some cash. And Kevin mentioned that his father's coin collection might be valuable. I was thinking about having it appraised for insurance purposes, but I can't seem to find it anywhere." Dorothy watched Vanessa's face through her peripheral vision and saw the unmistakable flash of Pawnee. See that crossed her features before being quickly concealed behind a mask of concerned helpfulness. "Oh, that old coin collection. I remember Kevin mentioning it. Are you sure Gerald didn't sell it years ago? I can't imagine he would have kept valuable coins just sitting around the house, where they could be stolen." Dorothy's heart began racing. Vanessa was trying to plant the idea that Gerald himself had disposed of the coin collection, creating an alternative explanation for its absence. This was psychological manipulation at its most sophisticated, rewriting history to cover up present crimes. No, dear, Gerald treasured that collection. He would never have sold it. In fact, he always said he wanted to pass it on to Kevin someday. "Well, you know how memory can play tricks on us as we get older," Vanessa said with false sympathy. "Maybe you're remembering something that happened differently than you think." 25 minutes into the visit, Vanessa made the excuse Dorothy had been waiting for. "I should check on those plants in your bedroom. That jade plant still looks a little droopy." "Of course, dear. You're so thoughtful to help with my houseplants." Dorothy remained in her chair, listening intently as Vanessa's footsteps moved down the hallway toward the bedroom. The hidden cameras would be capturing everything now, every drawer opened, every item touched, every crime committed. But what happened next exceeded Dorothy's expectations in the most shocking way possible. Instead of conducting a careful, secretive search like previous visits, Dorothy could hear Vanessa making a phone call from the bedroom. "It's me," Vanessa said in hushed but audible tones. "I'm at the old lady's house now." No, she still doesn't suspect anything. She's as blind and clueless as ever. "Yes, I already got the coin collection last week. Kevin thinks she misplaced it. I'm grabbing the last of the good jewelry today. And then we need to move fast on the bank account numbers I photographed." Dorothy's hands trembled as she listened to Vanessa incriminate herself with every word. The recording devices were capturing a confession that would be impossible to deny in court. "The medical records I copied show enough health problems that we can probably get Kevin to agree to power of attorney within the next month," Vanessa continued. "Once I have legal control of her finances, we can clean out everything and disappear before anyone figures out what happened." Dorothy felt sick to her stomach. Vanessa wasn't just planning to steal Dorothy's remaining belongings, she was orchestrating a complete financial takeover that would leave Dorothy destitute and Kevin devastated when he realized how thoroughly he had been manipulated. "Kevin's so worried about his mommy that he'll probably thank me for taking over her financial management. He has no idea how much money she actually has, or how little she's going to have left by the time we're finished." Vanessa's phone conversation continued with increasingly damning revelations. "I've already used her social security number to open to credit cards in her name. The bills are going to a P.O. box, so she'll never see them. With her vision problems, Kevin will just assume she's confused if she mentions getting calls from creditors." Dorothy realized with horror that Vanessa's crimes extended far beyond simple theft into sophisticated identity fraud that could destroy Dorothy's credit and financial reputation for years to come. "The bank account in Phoenix is ready to receive the transfers. Once we drain her checking and savings accounts, we'll have maybe 48 hours. Dorothy watched Vanessa's reaction carefully. The younger woman's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, and her hand moved unconsciously to adjust her purse strap, a nervous gesture that Dorothy had learned to recognize as a sign of guilt. "Oh, what kind of items? You know how easy it is to misplace things when you can't see clearly." There it was, the immediate dismissal of Dorothy's concerns. The assumption that visual impairment meant cognitive impairment. But this time, Dorothy was ready with a response calculated to make Vanessa reveal more than she intended. "Well, I seem to be missing some jewelry and some cash. And Kevin mentioned that his father's coin collection might be valuable." I was thinking about having it appraised for insurance purposes, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. Dorothy watched Vanessa's face through her peripheral vision and saw the unmistakable flash of pawnee. See that crossed her features before being quickly concealed behind a mask of concerned helpfulness. Oh, that old coin collection. I remember Kevin mentioning it. Are you sure Gerald didn't sell it years ago? I can't imagine he would have kept valuable coins just sitting around the house, where they could be stolen. Dorothy's heart began racing. Vanessa was trying to plant the idea that Gerald himself had disposed of the coin collection, creating an alternative explanation for its absence. This was psychological manipulation at its most sophisticated, rewriting history to cover up present crimes. No, dear, Gerald treasured that collection. He would never have sold it. In fact, he always said he wanted to pass it on to Kevin someday. Well, you know how memory can play tricks on us as we get older, Vanessa said with false sympathy. Maybe you're remembering something that happened differently than you think. 25 minutes into the visit, Vanessa made the excuse Dorothy had been waiting for. I should check on those plants in your bedroom. That jade plant still looks a little droopy. Of course, dear, you're so thoughtful to help with my houseplants. Dorothy remained in her chair, listening intently as Vanessa's footsteps moved down the hallway toward the bedroom. The hidden cameras would be capturing everything now, every drawer opened, every item touched, every crime committed. But what happened next exceeded Dorothy's expectations in the most shocking way possible. Instead of conducting a careful, secretive search like previous visits, Dorothy could hear Vanessa making a phone call from the bedroom. "It's me," Vanessa said in hushed but audible tones. "I'm at the old lady's house now." No, she still doesn't suspect anything. She's as blind and clueless as ever. Yes, I already got the coin collection last week. Kevin thinks she misplaced it. I'm grabbing the last of the good jewelry today. And then we need to move fast on the bank account numbers I photographed. Dorothy's hands trembled as she listened to Vanessa incriminate herself with every word. The recording devices were capturing a confession that would be impossible to deny in court. The medical records I copied show enough health problems that we can probably get Kevin to agree to power of attorney within the next month, Vanessa continued, once I have legal control of her finances. We can clean out everything and disappear before anyone figures out what happened. Dorothy felt sick to her stomach. Vanessa wasn't just planning to steal Dorothy's remaining belongings, she was orchestrating a complete financial takeover that would leave Dorothy destitute and Kevin devastated when he realized how thoroughly he had been manipulated. Kevin's so worried about his mommy that he'll probably thank me for taking over her financial management. He has no idea how much money she actually has, or how little she's going to have left by the time we're finished. Vanessa's phone conversation continued with increasingly damning revelations. I've already used her social security number to open to credit cards in her name. The bills are going to a P.O. box, so she'll never see them. With her vision problems, Kevin will just assume she's confused if she mentions getting calls from creditors. Dorothy realized with horror that Vanessa's crimes extended far beyond simple theft into sophisticated identity fraud that could destroy Dorothy's credit and financial reputation for years to come. The bank account in Phoenix is ready to receive the transfers. Once we drain her checking and savings accounts, we'll have maybe 48 hours before anyone notices. That should be plenty of time to disappear. Dorothy listened as Vanessa outlined a criminal enterprise that would have left Dorothy financially ruined and emotionally destroyed. The scope of the planned theft was breathtaking, not just thousands of dollars in stolen belongings, but the complete liquidation of Dorothy's life savings through identity fraud and financial. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Vanessa's mask was slipping, and Dorothy could see the calculating predator beneath the helpful daughter-in-law facade. Dorothy, I think your vision problems and your age might be causing some confusion. Maybe you should talk to Kevin about getting some help managing your belongings. It's not healthy to start becoming suspicious of family members who are only trying to help you. I'm not confused, Vanessa. I know exactly what's missing, and I know exactly when it disappears. Vanessa's voice took on an edge that Dorothy had Never heard before, cold, threatening, and completely without the artificial sweetness she usually employed. Dorothy, you need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. People might start thinking you're experiencing some kind of mental decline. That would be very sad for Kevin to have to deal with. Dorothy smiled with the calm confidence of someone holding all the cards. Actually, Vanessa, I can prove everything. I have video recordings of your visits, audio recordings of your phone conversations, and witness statements from multiple neighbors who have observed your suspicious behavior. The color drained from Vanessa's face as the implications of Dorothy's words sank in. You've been recording me. That's illegal. Actually, it's perfectly legal in Arizona. And the recordings show you stealing my belongings, going through my private papers, photographing my financial documents, and making phone calls in which you confess to identity fraud and conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. Vanessa stood up abruptly, her purse clutched tightly in her hands. You're delusional. No one will believe the confused ramblings of a blind old woman. They'll believe high-definition video footage with clear audio and timestamps. They'll believe witness testimony from multiple neighbors. And they'll believe the testimony of postal worker who documented you tampering with my mail. As if on cue, Dorothy's phone rang. She answered it calmly, never taking her attention off Vanessa's increasingly panicked expression. Hello, Detective Martinez. Yes, I have all the evidence we discussed. Yes, she's here right now. Yes, please come immediately. Dorothy hung up the phone and looked directly at Vanessa. Detective Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit will be here in about 5 minutes. He's very interested in seeing the evidence of elder abuse, identity fraud, mail tampering, and conspiracy that we've collected over the past 2 weeks. Vanessa made a desperate lunge toward the front door. But Carmen appeared at the window and waved cheerfully. Martha and Joe Kowalski had positioned themselves in their front yard, ostensibly working in their garden but actually serving as additional witnesses to prevent Vanessa from leaving. You can't do this to me, Vanessa snarled, her mask finally slipping completely. I'm Kevin's wife. I'm family. No, Dorothy said with quiet dignity. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. And family doesn't try to destroy each other's lives for money. You're not family, Vanessa. You're a criminal who made the mistake of choosing the wrong victim. Detective Martinez arrived with 2 uniformed officers and a warrant for Vanessa's arrest. The evidence Dorothy and her allies had collected was so comprehensive that the arrest warrant had been approved within hours of Dorothy's formal complaint. Vanessa Hartwell, you're under arrest for elder abuse, grand theft, identity fraud, mail tampering, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Detective Martinez announced as the handcuffs clicked into place. As Vanessa was led away in custody, she made one final attempt at manipulation. Kevin will never forgive you for this. You're destroying his marriage and his happiness. Dorothy's response was calm and final. Kevin deserves to know the truth about who he married. And he deserves better than a wife who was planning to steal his inheritance and abandon him after destroying his mother's life. Within 48 hours, the scope of Vanessa's criminal enterprise became clear through the police investigation. She had stolen over $47,000 in cash and valuables from Dorothy over the course of 8 months. The identity fraud had resulted in over $23,000 in fraudulent credit card charges. The savings bonds she had stolen were worth an additional $31,000. Most shocking of all, police discovered that Dorothy was not Vanessa's only victim. Working with her accomplice, a boyfriend named Derek Chen who had been planning to flee to Mexico, Vanessa had been systematically targeting elderly residents throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. Dorothy's courage in coming forward had prevented at least 6 other families from being victimized. Kevin was devastated when he learned the truth. But he was also profoundly grateful to Dorothy for stopping Vanessa before she could complete her plan to drain Dorothy's life savings and disappear. The marriage was annulled immediately, and Kevin moved back into Dorothy's house temporarily to help her recover from the emotional trauma of the abuse. Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you, Kevin said through tears as they sat together in Dorothy's living room. I was so happy to be married again that I ignored all the warning signs. You tried to tell me what was happening, and I dismissed your concerns as confusion. I failed you as a son. Kevin, you're not responsible for Vanessa's crimes. She was a professional manipulator who spent months planning how to exploit our family's love and trust. The important thing is that we stopped her before she could complete her plan. Vanessa's trial became a landmark case in Arizona elder abuse law. The video evidence Dorothy had collected was so comprehensive that Vanessa's attorney advised her to accept a plea bargain rather than face a jury trial that would likely result in maximum sentences. Vanessa was sentenced to 8 years in prison for elder abuse and financial fraud. Derek Chen received 6 years for conspiracy and identity fraud. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to Dorothy and the other victims they had targeted. Sarah Chen, Dorothy's attorney, helped Dorothy recover not just the stolen items and money, but additional damages for emotional distress and punitive damages designed to deter future criminals from targeting elderly victims. Mrs. Ashford, your case is going to be studied in law schools and used to train police officers about elder abuse, Sarah explained. Your documentation and evidence collection were so thorough that you've essentially created a template for other victims to follow. Dorothy's victory had ripple effects throughout the Willowbrook community. The neighbors who had helped her became advocates for other elderly residents, creating an informal network of people who watched out for signs of abuse or exploitation. Carmen Rodriguez organized a monthly support group meeting at the community center where elderly residents could share concerns and learn about resources for protecting themselves from scams and abuse. James Morrison, the postal worker, began a program to train mail carriers to recognize signs of mail tampering and financial exploitation of elderly customers. Most importantly, Dorothy's story inspired other elderly residents to speak up when they suspected they were being victimized. Knowing that their concerns would be taken seriously and that help was available, the experience of fighting back against Vanessa had transformed Dorothy in ways she hadn't expected. Instead of feeling like a helpless victim of circumstances beyond her control, she felt empowered and capable of protecting herself and others. She began volunteering with the Elder Abuse Support Group, using her experience to help other victims understand that they weren't alone and that justice was possible even when the criminals were family members. The hardest part, Dorothy would tell new support group members, is accepting that someone you trusted has chosen to hurt you deliberately. Once you accept that reality, you can start building a case and fighting back effectively. Dorothy also reconnected with her love of reading by learning to use new technology designed for people with visual impairments. Her sharp mind and organizational skills, which Vanessa had dismissed as useless, became valuable assets in helping other elderly people navigate complex legal and financial systems. 6 months after Vanessa's conviction, Dorothy received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from Ruth, one of the support group members whose grandson's girlfriend had been stealing from her. Dear Dorothy, I wanted you to know that your courage in fighting back gave me the strength to report my own situation. Thanks to the example you set and the resources you shared, my granddaughter's boyfriend has been arrested and I've recovered most of my stolen money. More importantly, my family now believes me and supports me. You saved not just your own life, but the lives of many other people who learned from your example. Gerald's coin collection was eventually recovered from a pawn shop where Derek had sold it. Each coin was exactly as Gerald had left it, carefully preserved and documented. But Dorothy decided to do something Gerald would have approved of. She donated the collection to the Willowbrook Public Library, where it became part of a permanent exhibit about local history and the importance of preserving family treasures. Gerald always said that the most valuable things in life were meant to be shared, Dorothy told the librarian as she made the donation. I think he would be happy knowing that his collection is helping other people appreciate the importance of preserving their own family histories. On a perfect dessert evening 1 year later, Dorothy sat on her back patio watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Carmen was beside her, as she often was these days, sharing a cup of tea in comfortable conversation. Do you Ever regret fighting back instead of just moving away or trying to ignore what was happening? Carmen asked. Dorothy considered the question carefully before answering. Carmen, for 73 years, I've believed that good people deserve protection and that bad people need to face consequences for their actions. When Vanessa targeted me, she wasn't just stealing my belongings, she was betting that I was too old, too isolated, and too powerless to fight back. Proving her wrong wasn't just about getting justice for myself, it was about proving that elderly people deserve respect, protection, and the right to live with dignity. Dorothy smiled as she watched a roadrunner dart across her backyard, chasing some unseen prey with single-minded determination. Vanessa thought that becoming old meant becoming helpless. She learned that becoming old can also mean becoming wise, patient, and absolutely ruthless when protecting the people and principles you care about. As the desert stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Dorothy raised her teacup in a quiet toast to Gerald's memory, to the friends who had helped her seek justice, and to all the elderly people who refused to be anyone's victims. The desert night was peaceful, her home was secure, and justice had been served. Dorothy Ashford had won more than a legal victory. She had reclaimed her power, her dignity, and her right to live without fear. And somewhere in an Arizona state prison, Vanessa Hartwell was learning the hard way that underestimating a determined grandmother was the biggest mistake she would ever make. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.